Welcome back to my New Zealand South Island road trip series. In this episode, I'll be showing you our beautiful road trip from Christchurch down to Tekapo and then continuing on our journey through the inland route down to Dunedin. We'll show you some of these stops along the way, and to be honest, they're not to be missed, so make sure you hang around to check them out. If you're new here and would like to see how we spent our first couple of days on New Zealand soil exploring Christchurch, be sure to check out episode 1. I'll link it in the description below. After picking up our car at Go Rentals near Christchurch Airport, we stocked up on some essentials and then made the start to our most incredible road trip journey, taking the State Highway 73, 77, 79 and 8 down to Lake Tekapo. We thought it had so much more to offer than pretty much just taking the State Highway 1 and then cutting inland to Tekapo. My first tip for this video is to make sure that you have thoroughly researched the route that you would like to take, including all the stop-offs you'd like to do along the way. The thing you'll want to do is to create some maps that are available offline. These were really helpful while we were on the road, although we did find that connectivity throughout most of New Zealand was actually really good, which we found quite surprising, as we were told that in lots of locations it's completely off-grid, but we did find that was only when you are in the really remote locations. So try not to worry too much about that if you are sticking to the main roads. Shortly after leaving Christchurch, the roads really emptied out, and to be honest, most of the traffic that we saw was coming towards us, back towards Christchurch. The mountains in the distance started to loom, and we were so excited to just be driving towards them. It was absolutely incredible. The roads were fantastic to drive, although we are used to driving on the left in the UK. Our first stop was at Rakaia Gorge. It was stunning. We had parked up in a car park on the left-hand side. We were able to just cross the road and head off onto a trail, which did take about an hour and a bit to get to the lookout area. I personally do think it was worth it. I think it was the first stop on our road trip. We wanted to make it count. It was a relatively simple hike, although there were a couple of rocky areas that I would say make sure you're wearing your hiking boots. And I think a lot of places in New Zealand might catch you off guard a little bit. There's somewhere else later on in this video where it seems like a really simple hike, and then out of nowhere it will get quite rocky. And I personally wouldn't want to do that in just trainers alone. So make sure you've always got your hiking boots easily accessible to you. The views though were incredible. The turquoise blue water, the backdrop, it was everything we expected New Zealand to be. And we were just hoping the rest of the holiday was going to live up to our first few days. Christchurch was amazing, and then the start to our road trip was absolutely amazing. There were other places that we wanted to stop along this route, but I think the hike took us a little bit longer than we were anticipating. And we also had somewhere in mind that we wanted to stop to get our first taste of New Zealand pie, and we wanted to make sure we would get there before closing. So unfortunately, it did mean us missing the Our nature reserve, which is not too far. I think it's about 30 minutes from Rakaia Gorge car park. I think we just felt that we would be seeing so much more nature on our trip, and if we had to choose between the Rakaia Gorge and the nature reserve, then Rakaia Gorge and that hike won personally for us. But I would recommend you checking that out, seeing if it's somewhere you would want to stop. Maybe if you don't want a full hike at Rakaia Gorge, you can just stop there for that viewpoint, take a couple of quick snapshots, and then move on to our nature reserve just for a really gentle walk around there. Now, just some general tips about driving in New Zealand that I personally didn't really know much about before I got behind the wheel. The first is there are a lot of single lane bridges. I personally didn't mind them too much because the roads weren't particularly busy while we were out there. We went in October, which is shoulder season, and we are in the southwest of the UK, and we're quite used to quite narrow roads and navigating oncoming traffic. Sometimes I just felt the give way signs on the single lane bridges seemed to go in the wrong way, because you couldn't quite see, it would be you giving way, but you couldn't quite see if there was anything coming around the corner. at the end of the bridge. I think just use your common sense with them and you'll be absolutely fine. A lot of the longer single lane bridges will have a passing bay midway along them as well. The one thing that did scare me though, and that I completely wasn't prepared for, was the railway crossings. You have to stop and you have to look kind of right and left to see if there is a train coming. I don't know, there's not too many trains in New Zealand, so you kind of feel that you're never going to come across a train, and we didn't ever come across a train. And I don't know if anyone watching has any advice on what they do when they're driving across these, but the signs clearly say stop and look. So you would look left and right and then kind of just put your foot down and get across that railway line as quickly as possible. And finally, the other thing that we weren't expecting to see in New Zealand on our road trip were signs for wallaby reportings. We didn't know that there were wallabies in New Zealand. Unfortunately, they are a pest over there, hence why there are signs to say give a certain number a call if you do see one. Now, there were two foodie stops we wanted to make sure we visited during our road trip. The first was Burkes of Geraldine. This was a lovely little shop, and honestly I found a couple of jams there and a couple of like cordials that kept us going for the whole trip. Now, the jams were incredible. The cherry jam, I mean, if anybody wants to send me a few jars, please do. They are incredible. I feel Burkes of Geraldine are a little bit of a national treasure of New Zealand. They produce some absolutely fantastic quality food items, and I love going to any places like farm shops anyway in the UK, so to be able to pop in, see what they had to offer and pick up a few bits for the remainder of the 3-week trip was absolutely ideal. I thoroughly recommend stopping there. They've also got a cafe. We didn't stop at the cafe there because we had plans to go on to Fairlie Bakehouse. We had heard such amazing things about Fairlie Bakehouse. I was just a little bit worried because it was getting on a little bit. I knew they closed at about 4 o'clock and I wanted to make sure we got there while they still had enough pie varieties available for us. Luckily, when we got there, they still had plenty of pies available. We both opted for the steak and cheese pie, and it was our first taste of the New Zealand pies out there, and wow. Yeah, I was shocked. I just thought a pie's a pie, but no, I get the hype. I get the hype, New Zealand. The pies are incredible. After our pie, we continued our road trip down towards Tekapo with one more stop to take. We stopped at Burkes Pass Lookout. It's quite close to Tekapo, so I do think on a good day it's worth stopping at. The views are 360-degree panoramic views, and it's still nice to stop and stretch your legs even though you're just outside of Tekapo, and I'm sure you're going to be doing a walk around there as well, but it's nice to try and stop at as many of the lookouts as you possibly can. There's a fairly big car park. There were a few other people there, but yeah, it was a great location to stop at just for a quick 5 minutes, take a couple of pictures, take in the scenery, and then get back in the car and finish up day 1 of the road trip. When we arrived in Tekapo, we went straight to the hotel. We were staying at the Peppers Bluewater Resort. Now, it was just one night that we were staying in Tekapo, so I wasn't overly fussed about the room that I had booked. However, I possibly should have looked into it a little bit more because the room that we were given was tiny. We didn't really have enough room to repackage our suitcases. We just had to stack them up in the corner. It was literally a double bed and barely any room to move around that double bed. I would say the one good thing about the room was it had a lovely bathroom. The bathroom was probably half the size of the actual bedroom itself. I think where we had just come from the Adina Heritage in Christchurch, where we had paid the equivalent of 120 Great British pounds per night, the Peppers Bluewater Resort was around 130 Great British pounds per night. So it was more expensive for a fraction of the size. In hindsight, I probably wouldn't have stayed in Tekapo itself. I think it's very touristy, and I think it's been purpose built for that tourism market. So therefore, a lot of the accommodation does cost a lot more than what you would get elsewhere. So I would probably recommend either staying somewhere closer to Mount Cook, especially if you're interested in doing some of the walks and exploring that area, or I personally wish we had stayed somewhere in Twizel instead. So that would still give you an opportunity to visit Tekapo, visit Lake Pukaki, and then stay somewhere that's not quite as touristy, probably at a fraction of the cost. Tekapo itself was beautiful. Clear blue water, and the church is really pretty. I just personally felt that it could be somewhere that you stop as you're passing through, and then you choose to stay somewhere that feels a little bit more comforting, a little bit more relaxing. Of course, it is personal preference, and if you are doing something like the stargazing experience, which we wanted to do but we didn't book in advance because we didn't want to have to worry about whether the visibility would be good enough, and we personally didn't want to be swapped with the indoor experience if the visibility wasn't clear. So if there are activities that you want to do in Tekapo, then yes, it probably is worth you staying there. But if you just want to see the Church of the Good Shepherd, you want to view Lake Tekapo with the mountains in the background, then I would say do that as part of your road trip and then move on to the next place. In terms of lakes, we preferred Lake Pukaki just down the road from Lake Tekapo. We thought the water looked a lot more blue. We felt the mountains were a lot closer, and overall it was just a lot more tranquil. We arrived at about 8 o'clock in the morning because we left Peppers Bluewater as early as possible. We just wanted to escape the tourist trap. So we left super early, went to Lake Pukaki, and it was absolute bliss. We stayed there for a while, just absorbing the views, and it was one of those standout New Zealand moments. When I was planning our New Zealand trip, Mount Cook was initially on our itinerary. However, due to timings and wanting to go to some of the other more remote locations, we just didn't have time to do it, and I was absolutely gutted. I know when we go back to New Zealand, which we 100% will be doing, Mount Cook is right up there with places that we missed out on last time that we have to visit next time. I think it just plays into what your priorities are. If you wanted to do some of the Hooker Valley and you wanted to do some of the walks around that region, then I would prioritise spending a night or two in the Mount Cook area. After admiring the views at Lake Pukaki for quite some time, we were starting to get a little bit hangry and in need of our breakfast and our coffee. We found the perfect place in Twizel, which was great because we were stopping there to fuel up the car anyway. The place we stopped for breakfast was called Mintfolk & Co, and it had only just opened up. I think the day before it had only just opened up after refurbishment. So what we saw was spectacular. It was so lovely in there, so warm, so welcoming. The staff were very, very friendly. We grabbed ourselves a window seat so we could people watch for a little bit. One of the best breakfasts of our entire stay. Even if you're not staying in Twizel, if you need to stop there for some fuel or if you're just passing and you're hungry, I recommend checking out Mintfolk & Co. After our bellies are full, we moved on to our next stop, which was the Clay Cliffs. Once you have done the 10 kilometres of the gravel tracks, you will get to a gate for the visitor parking, and there is an honesty box there. I believe it's around $5 per vehicle, so it's not much at all. So you would just pop your money into the honesty box and open up the gate, drive through, and then close that gate up again. You'll get to the Clay Cliffs car park, and it's quite a big car park. You'll probably see quite a lot of camper vans there, so you know, if they can get up the gravel road, then I'm sure you can get up the gravel road in your car. It probably takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and it's a relatively easy walk to get up to the main Clay Cliffs, and it's very beautiful, very otherworldly. Just bear in mind that when you actually get to the Clay Cliffs, it is quite rocky. So much like with the Rakaia Gorge track, you need to make sure that you are wearing your hiking boots. Just go to the highest point that you feel comfortable with and take in the surroundings. Now, it has been a filming location for the live action Mulan. I'm pretty sure other films have probably filmed there as well, and you can completely see why. So I thoroughly recommend doing it. It's just whether or not you feel you have the time to go out of your route to squeeze that in. So the next location were the Elephant Rocks, and much like the Clay Cliffs, it is another otherworldly experience. There was one in particular that I thought looked like a little bit like Dumbo, kind of lying down, trunk out in front. By the time we left the Elephant Rocks, we were starting to get a little bit peckish and really craving a little bit of caffeine. We had shortlisted a town called Oamaru, and this is known for its steampunk architecture and just lots of different structures. I'm not really a steampunk fan, but when we got there, it was still really nice to be able to see some of the statues and the artwork that was surrounding the town. The main reason we stopped there though was to pick up some coffee. So we went to Tea Street, and I would have to say it was one of the best oat flat whites that I had throughout my entire trip. The other thing I really liked about Oamaru was the buildings. So there is a Victorian quarter, and I love old buildings, I love old signs. So this was definitely something that I could really appreciate. It was only a quick stop off in Oamaru because we still had one other place that we wanted to visit before reaching our final destination. Our final stop was at the Moeraki Boulders. This was somewhere that I really wanted to visit from watching other people's YouTube videos, from doing my research online. It just looked really stunning, really beautiful place to go to. Now, we were pushing it a little bit with the tides. Unfortunately, the tide was coming in when we were visiting, and the best time to visit the boulders would be at low tide. We were still able to walk along the beach towards the main section of the boulders. However, we couldn't stay too long. We could tell the tide was coming in and we knew we had to get back to the car park. We left the Moeraki Boulders and headed on to our final stop for the evening in Dunedin. In the next episode, I'll be showing you more of Dunedin and also what we thought of our tour down in the Otago Peninsula, where we went to spot some royal albatross, some penguins and some other wildlife. Then we'll be continuing our trip down to Bluff, where we caught the ferry across to Stewart Island, which is very exciting because we went searching for a kiwi. Now, did we find one? Well, subscribe to make sure you find out in the next episode. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.